Hi, my name is Ashley Davis and this is a build video for heliTuning.com. And what we're doing here is we're starting with the first build video in the series for the T-Rex 450 Sport Super Combo. And as usual, I'm starting with the RotorHead. This is normally the first part of a build with any helicopter. So we're going to put together the RotorHead. And one thing to immediately take note of with the 450 Sport is that the RotorHead is in fact already built. So one would assume that we've got very little to do and we can just install that onto the helicopter. Of course this is not true at all because whilst this part is already built for us, we can't trust that the person who built it has in fact Loctited all of the relevant screws and has made sure that this isn't going to come apart on us in flight. So the first thing we've got to do, unfortunately, is actually take it apart, Loctite the screws and then put it back together again. Of course this doesn't mean that we disassemble the whole thing and then put it back together. All this means is that we systematically work around the built RotorHead, taking a screw out, such as this one, putting some Loctite on it, putting it back, then doing the same for the other side, and we just systematically work our way all the way through all the components. These balls that are screwed onto the grips here, the balls that are screwed onto the arms here, every single component we need to work through and put some Loctite onto it just to make sure that it's not going to vibrate loose and come out in flight. Something else we need to do is take the blade grips off and put some silicone grease on the thrust braces as well, because these come ungreased and that won't do them any good at all. So we should get some grease and put that onto the thrust braces whilst we've got it apart, and then put it back together ready for flight. So I'm not going to go through a process of showing you removing every screw and adding Loctite to it. I'm sure you're very thankful for that. What I'm going to do is go through that process and do all of that for this particular part, and then I'm going to have to do the same procedure for the swash plate as well before we start looking at trying to assemble this onto the frame. But for the moment I'm going to Loctite all the screws on this, and then we'll have a quick look at the swash plate and what needs to be done on that as well. Okay, and here we have our swash plate. And the task to be accomplished with this is just to take each of the balls off, put some Loctite on it and then screw it back onto the swash plate, including this long ball here as well. This can also be unscrewed, Loctited and put back onto the swash plate. And once we've done all of that, we can get around to looking at building up the frames that the RotorHead needs to be installed onto, and for that there is some work to do rather than just taking it apart and adding Loctite to the various parts. Okay, so here we have our RotorHead, which I have now applied Loctite to all of the various screws on, and I've put some grease on the ball races. And as expected, when I took it apart, a lot of the screws had Loctite on, but there were maybe 2 or 3 amongst the whole of the assembly that were missing Loctite, specifically the feathering spindle bolts. So, and those are probably the most crucial ones of the lot. So. Just proves the point that you must take these pre-assembled parts apart and re-Loctite and put them back together. Now the more observant among you will have noticed that we don't have a flybar cage on here. This actually comes in a separate packet. Again, it's kind of partially assembled. You can see it here. Let's move that over. There we go. So partially assembled. We need to take this apart and put it around our flybar seesaw, this piece here. And put the flybar through the middle, and also we need to put a ball link on these central parts here, and of course Loctite all these screws up. So first thing to do is take this apart, put ball links in the middle. Okay, so here we have our flybar cage assembled with these kind of long links installed onto it, and this can now go onto the RotorHead. And goes kind of like that, and then fits It's maybe a little bit difficult to do on camera, but we'll give it a go. That. It's not quite straight, but you kind of get the idea here. That's been inserted on there, and then we need to put our fly bar through the middle, through here, right through the middle, and then out the other side here. So, and I'm definitely going to do that off camera because this needs some lining up. I haven't got that quite straight on there at the moment. Okay, there we go. That's the fly bar through the cage. Obviously I've Loctited all of these screws here as well. And the next thing we need to do is you need to get some calipers and just measure the same length from here to the end of the fly bar to the other side. So this length sticking out here needs to be exactly the same as the length sticking out the other side. And then once that is the same distance, we can Loctite and do up these grub screws on the underside, one each side, and that will hold the fly bar in place. And then we can install our paddles, which I've got here, onto the fly bar, and again we screw these down until we've got a gap between the cage and the paddle itself that is equal either side on each paddle. So I'll go ahead and install these on there, and we can take a look at that. Okay, so there we have our paddle on the fly bar, and this gap here on my machine is 71mm. Basically you screw the paddle down until it starts to feel like it's going a bit stiffer. And at that point it's where you can stop screwing it down, because you want these to be quite stiff on the fly bar so they can't flop around. So screw them down until they go stiff, and you'll probably end up with around 70 to 71mm, that distance there. And then the next thing you want to do is just sight down the paddle at this piece here. And you want to make sure that this is sort of horizontally in line with this for both paddles each side, so that when the fly bar cage is horizontal, the paddle is horizontal as well. Okay, and that's the first part of our RotorHead complete. The next thing we need to do is install the swash plate onto here. So I'll just grab that. Okay, you can see here I've just slipped the swash plate onto the main mast. You have to take the mast collar off first before you do that. Then slip the swash plate on, and then I've clipped the washout down links onto the swash plate either side of the swash plate, as you can see. And we can also clip on the down links here onto the washout mixers. So one arm onto that one there, and then the other side, that arm onto that one there, to put those into place. And then once we've done that, we can make up the rods for the rest of the head. So I'll come on to that in a moment. Okay, so for the upper mixer to blade grip link, and I just want to try and show you this here. We've got one ball here, and we have another ball here, and the links that go on those are these fixed links here, and you have one of those either side down onto the mixer arm, and they're the non-adjustable links. And then we have one last link to do, which goes from this ball here on the upper mixer down to the inner swash plate, down, let me just try and show you, down here, so from here to here, and that is an adjustable link, and we need to make that rod up. So I'm just going to put these links on here, and then we'll look at making up that other link. Okay, so these are the last two links we need to build up, and the four ball links to go on those rods. These are a 28mm rod, and we need to put one of these links on either end. So I'm going to put these on, and then when I come back I'll tell you exactly what the length should be of the overall rod, give you some dimensions for that. Okay, so here we have our two made up linkage rods, and the distance between each of the ball links here should be 19.5 millimeters according to the manual with the kit. So that's what I've done. I've set those to 19.5 millimeters distance, and we can fit those onto the rotor head, and then I'll come back and show you the completed head. Okay, so here's our completed rotor head, and you can see here all of the various links installed and in place. And this is the long link that we just fitted with the 19.5 millimeter gap in the middle here. Something that I haven't put onto my rotor head is the flybar weights. I have these here, just put them down there. These little flybar weights here. If you're a beginner, you will want to install these. They go on the flybar here, and basically you would put these right out here at the ends up against the plastic paddle, and then they have a little grub screw in them which secures them onto the flybar to hold them in place. And then they make it nice and stable, and as you get better you can move those weights in until they end up sort of in the middle, and then eventually take them off. But for an expert flyer you won't want these on at all because they just slow down the cyclic response of the helicopter. But for beginners you will want to fit those. It is a 450 model, and you will want all the stability you can get. Okay, so that's our rotor head completed, and the next thing for us to do is to build up the main frames.